Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you very much for watching. Today I've got for you my February reading wrap up. I read 8 books in February, which is kind of not surprising given that I managed to go on holiday in February. Hooray! Although if you follow me on Instagram you will know it was not the best holiday in the world, but at least I did get a lot of reading done, so there was a positive side to it. The first book I read this month, also I need to tell you that I haven't actually got physically most of the books because I've started trying to read library books and obviously not buying books as much, so I haven't actually got the books to kind of stand and show you, but I have filmed them so you can see what the covers look like and everything. The first book I read this month was The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. Greek mythology isn't really my genre of choice, but ever since I read Circe I thought I would give another one a chance. So this is the retelling of the Iliad from the point of view of Briseis. Briseis? I don't know how to say her name. She is a queen who was stolen from her homeland and given as a concubine to Achilles. So she has a very kind of integral part in this Battle of Troy. I thought it was really interesting to see the story from a female perspective. There were so many women in the camps at the time and they're just not mentioned in the Iliad in any kind of great detail. So to get it told from the women's point of view is a really kind of strong way to do the book. I really enjoyed it. The prose flowed really well. It was an enjoyable read, but something that I feel like I got a lot out of as well. So that was the first book that I read this month. Then I started a book but didn't quite finish it in time. So the next one I'm going to tell you about is called Jinxed, and Jinxed I got from the library. I didn't realise it was a children's book. It was in like the adult normal section, and it is a children's book, age 12 plus, so I guess young adult-ish, maybe a bit before young adult. I absolutely loved this book. I read it on the plane. The premise is that they're living in a world where everybody has a Baku, and a Baku is like an equivalent of a mobile phone. It's a little animal and it kind of is in tune with you. It tells you all your texts, it will call people for you, it manages your diary, you know, it does everything for you. The main character is a girl called Lacey Chu. She has worked all her life really hard. She's been a complete geek and she's not ashamed to admit that she's a geek. She worked really hard all her life because she wants to become a companion for Monka, which is this huge company who make the Bakus. And she has worked so hard in all her exams, and turns out that she doesn't get into Profectus, which is kind of the college where you have to go if you want to work for Monka. If you don't go there, you won't end up working there. And there's a lot about kind of class and the fact that she's from a lower social class than everyone else who was applying. But she goes out with her friend for the day and basically discovers something. Basically her friend's Baku runs away or is taken away, so she chases after it down this deep ravine, and in the bottom of the ravine she discovers this kind of mangled thing. She doesn't know what it is, but she's determined to find out what it is and to use her engineering skills to kind of see if she can get it working again. And what follows is an incredible story. It's brilliant. I absolutely loved it. I love every second of it, and I was really sad that I finished it. I probably finished the book in 2.5 hours. And I really now want to read the next one in the series, but it was a really enjoyable read, and it was really surprisingly so, especially once I realised it was a children's book. The third book I read this month is Where the Forest Meets the Stars by Glendi Vanderaa, and this is a book that I've had for quite a long time in my to be read pile, and the reason I hadn't picked it up was because it had quite small writing, and I was also a bit worried that it was going to be kind of supernatural from the description on the back. Turns out it's not supernatural in any way, shape or form. It is a really intelligently, cleverly well written book. It manages to tackle some really full-on topics and tackle it really well. The protagonist is Joanna Teal, and she is living and working in the forest. She's living in her professor's house, who doesn't kind of live there anymore, but she's there to study ornithology, and she's tracking nests, and she's taking time to kind of make sure that she does all of her work thoroughly. She's really clever. She's taken a lot of time to get to the point that she has. She's suffered from breast cancer and she has had a double mastectomy, and So you know all of this very quickly about her. Then a girl turns up and she calls herself Ursa Major, and she says that she's from another planet and that tells them about the language that she speaks, but she says that she's here to study humans. So this was the part that I thought might be kind of supernatural. I wasn't sure about it. When she turns up, she has bruises all over her, and obviously Joanna is really worried about her, but she calls the police and the girl runs away. So when the girl eventually comes back, she then enlists the help of her neighbour, who's called Gabriel Nash, and he comes along to try and kind of work out what to do with the girl, how they're going to work out who she is, because obviously she is someone's child. It's a really intricate story and a heartbreaking story. It's so well written and tackles these huge topics so well. I don't want to say loved the book, because I did love the book, but yeah, it does tackle some really, really big subjects, so just be careful, just be wary that it does do that. The fourth book I read this month is When the Curtain Falls by Carrie Hope Fletcher. I've read one of her books before and absolutely loved it, so I thought, yep, I'll pick this up from the library, I'll take this on a holiday with me, I'll read it, it will be wonderful. It was a good book. It wasn't a book I would read again. I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. I just felt the plot lacked any real depth, I guess. There are 2 stories running throughout the book, and the idea that West End theatres are haunted is also kind of running throughout both of them. The first story running through it is set in 1952, and it's about a brand new production of When the Curtain Falls, which is opening in the West End. The main female character in this, her dad has paid the director to make her kind of the star, because that's what she wants to do, but she doesn't have any experience. But she's coming into this, the director is quite an abusive, a very abusive character, both mentally, physically, sexually, and he is not a nice person at all, but he's also playing one of the roles in the show. And then running alongside that story, we have the rerun of this with new characters, one of whom is like a famous soap star, and he has all the kind of trappings of fame that go with that. It was just a bit vacuous, I guess, just a bit empty, just lacked something. I don't know what it was about it that just, it was easy enough to read, but I just felt like it lacked something. It wouldn't put me off reading Carrie Hope Fletcher again, because I know that she's written some really lovely books that I've enjoyed reading. So I would definitely read her stuff again, but that one just wasn't for me. The 5th book I read this month, I was really chuffed with this one. I went to the hotel library to just see what they had in there, because I'd finished all my holiday books, and they had The Binding, which I'd requested from my local library, but I knew there was a really long wait for it, so I was really, really chuffed to find it in the hotel library, just sitting there on a shelf saying, pick me up, which I did. And The Binding, I heard from Jess McGlynn that it was quite difficult to get into, and I definitely found for me it was like, it definitely took probably about 100 pages-ish to get into it. The Binding is by Bridget Collins, and it's set in an alternative universe where books are dangerous. Books are people's memories which have been bound. So bad things that have happened to them that have been bound, that are meant to be kept safe so that nobody else can see them, but that they have been relieved of, what was going on in their head, the things that have been stopping them from moving on with their lives potentially. The main character in this is a boy called Emmett Farmer, and he is sent to become a binder's apprentice. He obviously doesn't realise at this point that he has been bound, so he doesn't really know what's going on in terms of why he's going there, all this kind of stuff. But he's going to be a binder's apprentice, and there's an awful lot that goes into becoming a binder. Obviously you are writing down people's innermost, darkest memories that are not necessarily good things. He's instantly drawn to this character called Lucien Darnay, and he doesn't really know why, and he also has been suffering from kind of a fever, which the woman who he is apprenticing for says is the binding fever, because it's obviously like the memories trying to come back and all this kind of stuff. It's a really interesting concept for a book, and I absolutely loved it once I really got into it. I loved how the story was told. I thought it was a really clever concept. I liked the idea that books were memories and all of this kind of stuff. The story was really good and I was really into it, and I just didn't want it to end. But it was definitely one that I would recommend that you read. The next book I read is The Truths and Triumphs of Grace Atherton, which is quite hard to say, by Ancy Harris. And this isn't the kind of book I would normally pick up. I picked it up in the hotel library and just thought, yeah, I'll give this a go. But I actually really enjoyed it. The main character is a lady called Grace, who, when that book opens, you realise has clearly had quite a traumatic past in terms of her musical career, but you don't know what's happened. So you're going to obviously find out as the book goes on what's happened to Grace. She doesn't like to play the viola in front of people, but she's clearly an incredibly talented violist. Violist? I don't know how. She runs a music shop where she makes musical instruments, and she makes some of the best musical instruments that there are and sells them to people for a really good price. And she's clearly very talented at what she does, and she has this kind of like little motley crew of her assistant, or a girl who works for her called Nadia, who is also very talented, and also Mr. Williams, who is one of her customers, but clearly a really lovely character. So she's kind of got this motley crew of people who around her who support and love her. But she has been involved for a long time with a married man, and she believes, called David, she believes that he will be leaving his wife for her. She's believed this for a long time. They've been trying for a baby for about 8 years, and she's absolutely in love with him, totally besotted with him. So she has a very complicated personal life, and that's kind of, you know, it draws you in, this kind of fitting this jigsaw together of this person's life and how everything's kind of working or not working. It was a really enjoyable book, really well written. It flowed really well. The characters were really likable. I felt I learned a lot about kind of wood instruments and things like that, which I wouldn't have thought I would. But yeah, absolutely brilliant book. Really enjoyed it. The next book I read is A Sister's Gift by Giselle Green, and this book is a premise of a woman who's absolutely desperate to have children. Two sisters who are living a very different life. Their mum left them when they were very young with their best friend, with her mum's best friend. So their mum's best friend brought them up and looked after them, gave them a home, left them a home. The mum was kind of exploring, doing stuff in Amazon. She was doing really good work, but obviously she just didn't have time for children. I don't think she was necessarily very maternal. Holly is the main character. She and her husband Richard are desperately trying for a baby. They've been trying for many years and it's just not happening, but she's becoming increasingly desperate about it. She's discovered that she can't have her own children, and her own eggs are not viable as kind of an option for surrogacy. And Holly's younger sister Scarlett is quite a lot younger than Holly, so Holly kind of ended up bringing her up, really. But they have quite a complicated relationship. Scarlett is out in the Amazon doing the kind of work that her mum had done, really living life to the full and enjoying it, but she doesn't have many responsibilities. She doesn't really have much going on. It turns out that she's quite desperately in love with Holly's husband Richard. The book gets really complicated and a bit ridiculous with the storyline. I felt like nobody would, I can't tell you what happens without giving away spoilers, but nobody would do what Holly does in real life. Nobody would be that desperate. So I found this book, I finished it, but I really didn't enjoy reading it. The plot line was just ridiculous. The characters weren't likeable and they were just doing stupid things that didn't make sense for normal people to be doing. So yeah. Oh, I've just realised I've read more books than I thought I had. It must have been 9, because I also read this one on the plane on the way home, and I've clearly not put it on my Goodreads, and that is I Looked Away by Jane Corrie. There's a woman called Ellie who is in her late 40s, and she has her grandson Josh who comes around, and every Monday she looks after Josh, and she has a very complicated past from her brother who died when he was in her care. but she was obviously a child, so, you know, but she blames herself. So it's all a bit complicated, and the book starts with her looking after her grandson Josh. She's having a tough time. Her husband's been having an affair with a very glamorous local woman who's leaving the area, but she finds her husband on the phone to this woman again, and when she turns back she realises that Josh has got out of the garden, and then she sees his t-shirt floating in the pond, so just assumes the absolute worst. And what follows then is quite a spectacular breakdown, but you don't really know exactly what's happening. So you then follow the lives of Ellie and Joe, and Joe is a homeless person. It's a really well written story. I enjoyed the book. It was a bit predictable in some parts in terms of being a thriller, but I did enjoy reading it. I can't believe I've read so many books. But yeah, this was one that I did enjoy a bit more. It's one that I picked up from the hotel library. It's not necessarily something I would have picked up myself. The final book I read this month is Early Riser, and this is one I started at the very beginning of the month but didn't finish till the very, very end because I had to leave it. I was about 100 pages from the end, and then we went on holiday and I didn't want to take it with me because it's a nice book. So this is Early Riser by Jasper Fforde, and this is I haven't read a Jasper Fforde book in quite a while, but I absolutely love his books. They're always a bit bonkers, and it takes a bit of getting used to. It's like a different language. You have to learn so much. This is about Charlie Worthing, and it is set in this dystopian, weird world where winters are a really long time where most people kind of hibernate for winter, so they get really, really overweight and then they just sleep for the whole of winter, and other people are kind of out there making sure that everything carries on going. And it's a very odd world, but I really, really enjoyed this book. It's funny, it's zany enough to kind of keep you captured in it, but not too zany that you're like, what? But some bits of it are a bit like that. There's these mythical kind of creatures, like there's one called the Gronk, who is killing people who are not worthy. It's just a bonkers book, absolutely brilliantly written, really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next Jasper Fforde book that I read. I hope you're still with me. That was quite a lot of books that I read in February. I hadn't realised it was quite that many. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you again soon. Alright, bye.